I would like to call this meeting to order. It is February 20th, 2012, and I'd ask if the audience would please rise and join the village board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Breyer.
Here.
Trustee Glasgow.
Here.
Trustee Sidor.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Farwell.
Here.
Trustee Blackwood.
Yes.
Trustee Hayes.
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
President Mulder.
Here. We have a quorum, and we move to item 4. For those of you in the audience, if you wish to have a copy of the agenda, you can find copies. I believe there might be some in the back. And if you wish to address the board under citizens to be heard, we have blue slips in the back that we ask that you complete and bring up to the clerk, and she'll get them up here. If you're wishing to speak on an item that is on the agenda, please indicate that agenda item on that slip. Otherwise, you'll be taken under citizens to be heard, which is item 8 on our agenda. We move now to item 4, approval of minutes. We have before us for approval this evening the minutes of our Board of Trustees meeting of February 6th. Any comments, corrections, deletions, or additions?
Move approval.
Motion by Trustee Farwell, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. All those in favor of the approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We now move to the accounts payable, and I would call on Trustee Hayes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move approval of the payables dated February 15th, 2012 in the amount of $1,212,430.30.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Farwell. Any comments or questions from trustees? Anyone in the audience? Roll call, please.
Trustee Hayes.
Yes.
Trustee Farwell.
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood.
Yes.
Trustee Breyer.
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Sidor.
Yes.
Trustee Glasgow.
Yes.
President Mulder.
Yes. We move now to citizens to be heard, and I think we have everyone wishing to speak to an item on our agenda. Is there anyone who just came in and wants to say something that's not on our agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 2. Old business. The report of our Committee of the Whole meeting, which was held a week ago, February 13th, 2012. A number of important issues were discussed at length and voted upon, and the first motion that's to be reported out this evening is made by Trustee Sidor.
Thank you, Madam President. I will move now, as I did the evening of the 13th, that the Village Board adopt code provisions permitting composting addressing the following topics: definitions related to composting, allowable composting methods, maximum number of compost containers, location requirements for compost containers, materials allowed and prohibited in compost, nuisance prevention methods, and exemption and variance provisions.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Sidor, seconded by Trustee Farwell. Any other comments pertinent to this motion from trustees? None of the speakers that I have slips on were about it. All those in favor of the motion, is this an ordinance? Roll call? No? It comes back later? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Another well-discussed subject was the anti-idling education campaign, and we had a motion from Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move this evening, as I did on February 13th, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Village Board approval of the anti-idling campaign proposed by the Environmental Commission with the following conditions. Staff continues to develop an anti-idling policy for village vehicles. The campaign is educational only. The campaign has brochure and web-based materials. Signs can be installed in locations around schools, trains, stations, and parks if the respective governmental entities are supportive of such action and if a funding source is available.
Second.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee Rosenberg. Any comments, trustee Scaletta?
I have a comment, and I made the motion. So at the last meeting, we did talk about it, trustee Sidor brought up about it being no idling campaign instead of anti-idling. And I think that when we did the motion, it was anti-idling. Is there I guess I should ask my seconder, if there's a problem with it being a no idling campaign instead of anti-idling? And if there's any objection from staff.
Trustee Hayes, comment?
Well, it may be a minor point, but I think there are situations where vehicles do need to idle. You know, emergency vehicles, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but no idling means that we're advocating vehicles could never idle. So I think anti-idling probably better reflects what we're trying to accomplish. We're not certainly encouraging idling. That should not happen if it doesn't need to, but we're recognizing the fact that there may be vehicles that need to idle. So it's just a matter of semantics, but I would prefer to go with anti-idling.
Any other comments?
Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Dixon?
I hope this doesn't muddy the soup further, or muddy the water further, but one thing that's emerged in the last few days since the board discussed this was the possibility, since this is all voluntary, of referring to it as an idling-free zone, which gets away from that negative connotation of anti, but just an idling-free zone. So this is going to evolve, I think. You know, you've directed us to work on this, and we kept, I think the language correctly for tonight stayed the same, because this is how it was presented last Monday night, and you've brought it back that way tonight. But as we quote, get ready to roll this out, which is going to take some time, you know, idling free may be a term that's appropriate to use too.
Would that take action by the village board
No, 'cause this is
to
all-
change from anti-idling,
No.
which is
This is a voluntary program, so it does, and I saw Mr. Siegel shaking his head no.
Okay, so it could be tweaked a little bit before signs are made to better. My only thought as I listened to the motion and I was thinking village-wide, I think I have witnessed as much as 30 minutes idling by parents waiting for school to be dismissed. And there's many, many cars, and this did come to this village board through the Environmental Control Commission, whose effort is to advise this board on what's best for our environment. And excessive idling is an issue, and I know that there can be inclement weather, which you might get cold. Maybe that's the time you bring the blanket on the coat, or come a little closer to the dismissal time. But we've had this problem. I'm thinking of some of our refrigerated trucks. And don't get excited, Trustee Breyer, but we've had people where we have shopping centers that back up to residential properties, and I know that we've curbed their ability to idle. If they got to the delivery spot a little bit early, that they were not to go into that area near homes. And that was from a noise standpoint. But my question would be is are we going to notify the business community at all about their delivery trucks and how long they might wait? And should they be idling? Are we going to be putting any signages anywhere else besides these zones that are indicated in the motion?
These are all questions that are in the process of being worked on and will be even more so after the ratification this evening.
Trustee Sidor?
Just briefly, Mayor Mulder, we were just in discussions about just how to term it where it's friendly, and we don't want it to be, again, we're not going to enforce it. It's just just an educational campaign and kind of a little bit of a movement, as you witnessed, up to 30 minutes of idling. And I just want it to be, I personally would like to see the initiative be reasonable and welcomed. So we're just trying to keep it as friendly as possible.
And sometimes if we impose it upon ourselves, we'll follow it a little better than having big brother tell us what to do. But, you know, I think we all have to be careful about our environment and the air in which we breathe. And so we certainly want to try to suggest it, and probably the best way is by example, and have our residents do it. And then the signage would be simply sort of a nudge or reminder or heighten the sensitivity.
All of the above.
Trustee Breyer?
Well, I wasn't going to say a word about this, but when I heard you suddenly refer to refrigerated units, certainly except for incredibly cold weather, and if anyone ever has restarted a diesel unit and seen the fuel coagulate, they'd know that you can't shut it off in that weather. But when you talk about the refrigeration unit, you realize you can't turn that off. If any of you have ever paid for a load of asparagus, say, that insurance companies won't pay, they'll consider it driver error and written a check for 30 grand, you'd understand that you can't shut that off. And I just want it clear, I wasn't going to say a word, but when you brought this up, I just have to, that we have to realize in this modern world, there's things that we have to leave running, and that's one of them. And I just want to be sure, and for the uninitiated, most of the refrigerated, at least, I don't know what the wholesalers do off of South Watermark and places like that, use the smaller trucks, but I can tell you in the larger tractor trailers, there's recording units on the temperature that are in there for the entire length of the load, and if somebody were encouraged to shut that off, that would cause the recorder to show fluctuations in the temperature, which could lead people to end up writing a check for $30,000. So I think we need to, for spoiled produce, so I think we need to be careful that we don't encourage people to shut off units where it's inappropriate. And as I say, I wasn't going to bring this up, but when you got onto refrigeration units, I do think that we have to recognize the fragility of the product and not cause a problem.
Item 2 clearly says the campaign is educational only. And I think that's the heart of it. And we're trying to have everyone be just more conscious and aware of the environment in their daily lives and help wherever they can. Any other comments? Voice vote, all those in favor
I'm not,
signify. Oh,
excuse me, I'm not sure we clarified the motion here.
I'll stick with the motion as is. As long as staff obviously heard it last week and heard it again tonight, and they're sensitive to it, so I'm comfortable with it. And as much as you mentioned commercial vehicles, it does say that we're talking about schools, train stations, and parks, so I'm good to go.
all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Third motion from that meeting came from Trustee Glasgow.
I will move now, as I did then, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Village Board approval of the following steps to set up the proposed EAB fund. Number one, transfer $2 million from the general fund to the EAB fund in February 2012. Number two, hire a full-time EAB forestry position as of March 2012. Number three, plan for a bond issue of approximately $11.5 million in 2013.
Second?
Motion by Trustee Glasgow, second by Trustee Breyer. I do have a number of people who wish to address EAB. I don't know if it's specific to this motion or just EAB as a whole. I think I probably should just call him up and start with Mr. Tom McDonald. Welcome, Tom.
Good evening. I'm Tom McDonald from Surrey Ridge West Civic Association. I've been here before, and I am heartened because the first two times I've had a chance to stop here and chat with the board, I was given to understand that we had no money, that it was not possible to do any real funding of anything positive as regarding the trees themselves. And now we find, of course, that we do have $2 million has been found in the general fund, which is now available to start the campaign. And of course, the other aspect of it is that we will have a $11 million bond being issued perhaps in 2013 to take care of the removal and installation of new trees. However, in the meantime, I have done some looking into of the other villages and towns in our area, because I was told at the time, I said, why are they pushing you, they said, to come up with some sort of a planned way of treatment of our homeowner association's trees in our parkway, when up in Buffalo Grove, they're going to cut them all down. So I looked into it, and I'd like to spend a couple of minutes with you, giving you my experience in the last couple of days when dealing with certain towns. For instance, Naperville, with 15,000 trees and 147,000 people, have a plan to do something about their problem. In fact, they have been treating their parkway trees for the last 2 to 3 years at least. And in fact, last year they treated 4,500 trees and cut down 400. They were also very happy to tell me that they have now issued a request for a quote, RFQ I think it's called, and they are going to hire a vendor to come in and do that for them. So they are going to definitely treat their trees because they feel that it is a cost-effective way to handle it. I talked to Schaumburg. They have 12,000 trees. They're going to be letting out a contract now to treat 6,300 of their trees, ash trees, of course, anything over 20 inches. And they are going to use triage because I think it's an excellent product to use. They're also going to be they've come up with $128,000 to treat another 500 trees, and they got that money from their repaving fund, which, in other words, there has been a situation here which I got the impression that our reserves are sacrosanct. We're not allowed to touch them. In other words, work out some other way to do it. So all of a sudden we have come up with the $2 million. I talked to a vendor who is working closely with West Chicago. They like the work that he has been doing treating their trees so well that they've extended his contract out to 2017. Roselle is treating their own trees, and so is Downers Grove. That being the case, you've asked us as citizens to do our own through a people's choice. I would come up with a suggestion in this case. Since we have $2 million available for future activities, that perhaps we could take some of that money and give it to the homeowners as on part of a cost-sharing basis. I was talking to another subdivision. They were telling me that they're possibly going to be asking their homeowners for $150 per house, as Sam Moser did. And I thought to myself, well, suppose we took half of that. Suppose we gave $75 to each of the homeowners as a cost-sharing basis, 50-50 in other words, and see what we can do to make sure those trees don't die, because at the meeting of the whole, I was given to understand that the Forestry Department says that they're going to spend approximately $750 anyway if they had to cut down the tree in replacement. So if you were to give them $75, they would save you $750 because we're not going to have to cut down a tree that they saved. So why can't we have a cost-sharing basis program initiated as part of the entire package? Also, I was very disturbed to understand that EAB, the borer, the ash tree insect, is going to be around us for a long, long time. So we have been thinking as like stopgap methods in this case to treat our tree for 2 years. No, the trees are going to be around for a long time.
Tom, your time is flashing. I
Fine.
forgot to remind
That's okay.
everybody about 3 minutes.
I think I've made my point here.
Yeah.
I also like to think that our trees are a capital asset. I put a $3 million package on them. There's somebody who does a job of telling you how much your tree is worth. They come up with $200 per tree. We have 15,000 trees, therefore at $2 each, we have at least a $3 million asset, and I think a reserve should be set up just for that particular capital asset as was defined in the last meeting. So that being the case, I want to thank very much for your time, and hope we have a cost-sharing program initiated as part of the ongoing picture, because it will be some help and helps us to sell the package to our homeowners.
Thank you, Tom, for all
All right,
your
thank you.
research of our neighboring
Right.
communities. Mr. Dixon, do you have any comments at this time?
No.
Okay. Scott Jameson. Welcome, Scott.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
And we do have a 3-minute. I
Yes,
forgot
yeah,
to
I
mention
know that. He
I'm
got
sorry.
extra time. I'm late coming to the party here on EAB, and being an arborist is my profession. This is what I do, so I feel embarrassed that this is the first time I've addressed the trustees on this. There's 3 areas I want to make comments on: treatment, communication, and staffing. I'd feel much better about the bond fund if it was to go toward preserving the asset rather than simply removing the asset. Right now, it's about taking that asset out of the city. What's unique in the situation we have is there's a material that was just referenced before that works at an effectiveness of about a 90 percentile. It's unbelievable at how well this material works in controlling this pest. I just talked with Deb McCullough, a colleague, Dr. McCullough up at Michigan State, who just finished a study that said if you treat 20% of your trees over a 10-year period, you can preserve 99% of the population. In other words, you don't have to treat all the trees. And it has to do with populations and reproduction and how they move around. I was up in the Greenbrier area where almost all those trees are ash. If you go up there, 100% of blocks are ash. So visualize what happens when that tree canopy goes. Large ash trees must be protected. Trees are about the only asset that a village has that appreciates in value over time. The bigger the tree gets, the greater benefit it bestows upon a city. Replacing it with small trees is great. We will not see the benefit of that for 30 years. We'll all be gone. So it's important to protect the large trees. The U.S. Forest Service has a calculation measurement, and they say for every 5% of canopy that you lose, you increase your stormwater runoff about 2%. So if 30% of our canopy is ash, that calculates out to about 18% increase in stormwater runoff in the city. So there's a huge stormwater runoff situation there. Communication, I would say that it is a public outreach issue that was mentioned in the minutes. Most communities do not know how to organize. There's some block clubs here and associations that have that strength. I'm in the Pioneer Park area. We don't have that. So I would ask the city or the village to think about tools that the citizens can use to organize. And one of them might be putting a bid out that would negotiate prices on behalf of the citizens to engage in these contracts. These are, by the way, city assets that will be injected by outside contractors. So I think there's a need to coordinate at the city level. The other thing I would say is that this is a time when tree awareness could be at an all-time high. I was speaking with a teacher at Greenbrier at a basketball game yesterday, and she said the kids were crying because of the pink ribbons wrapped around trees. What a great opportunity to communicate about what's going on and the value of trees. Turn this crisis we have into a positive benefit about trees. And I would also add, perhaps this is a time also to create a tree board. I know we have an environmental commission. I couldn't find the minutes to see what's been going on, but absolutely, this might be a time. It's an East Coast model. Tree boards come together. They help staff. Staff hates it, but engages the citizens around issues, and it brings their engagement in a community to a much higher level. And the last thing I would add is staffing. Please don't add overhead. I think you could take that money. I got to believe it's probably a $60,000 position once you throw in benefits. Use that to treat trees. Use that to preserve the asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Bill Greeny?
Nice to see you again. Bill Graney, 2503 South Embers Lane, Arlington Heights. Nice to see all of you again. It's funny that the other two men were talking about the same thing that's on my mind, and it's cost sharing. But before we get to that, I want to commend the staff here for trying to get the word out to everybody about ash trees. The ribbons are a great idea. We got them on our street last week, but we seem to still have a communication problem because people are saying, what are those ribbons for? I made a suggestion before the meeting. I was talking to Drew, and I brought this up at a meeting that was held at the Public Works office a week after the first time we talked about EAB. Remember back in November or December? I was one of the yellers and screamers. Well, at that particular meeting, I mentioned that I had contacted 4 Catholic churches. I'm Catholic, so I know where most of the Catholic churches are in Arlington Heights and Mount Prospect. And I asked the people at the parish offices if we could put something in the church bulletin about EAB to educate people about this. And I mentioned this to Drew, and he said he'd drop off flyers over at the church. What we need is something in the bulletin that's printed in the bulletin. We can contact the synagogues, the churches of all denominations, mosques, whatever you have, any religious denomination. We should be able to put some small blurb, not 3 pages. They won't do that. But if you put a small blurb in the bulletins telling people, Do you have an ash tree? If you do, it might be gone within months or years. We suggest you go to the Village Arlington Heights website. Who doesn't have a computer, right? And go to the village website, find out if you have an ash tree. If you don't know, call the village. Sorry, guys. But Drew said they're getting calls about the ribbons. We have to educate people. My other comment is about cost sharing. I like Tom's idea, but you're all going to say, where are we going to get the money? That's what we've heard for the last 4 months. There's no money. I have a great idea. I came up with this, believe it or not, 3 hours ago. I'm sitting there thinking, how can we convince these people that we have to have an incentive to get people who are somewhat adamant about spending money on a tree? They don't realize the value, as the last speaker mentioned, the value of that tree, the canopy, the water, everything that's connected with the tree. How's this for an idea? You don't have to write a check. Give every homeowner that gets involved with this program, give them a voucher for a free parking sticker on their windshield. The money doesn't have to be paid until the 2013 vehicle stickers come out. It's only $30. It's something, but you're not writing a check. You already have staff members that are tracking the trees. You're all going to know who's treating their trees and which trees are treated. It's pretty easy in this day of computers where you can look at it and say, oh, yeah, that guy paid for his tree to be treated. Give him a free parking sticker for his car, one per household. If the person doesn't have a car, which I find to be somewhat unlikely, if they don't have an automobile, give them a dog or a cat license. I take my dogs to the vet, and I have to buy a license for them every year. Why a dog needs a license is, God forbid. It's beyond me, but I have 2 licenses for dogs, okay? Give them a free dog license. Give them a free voucher, not money, a voucher that I can bring to City Hall and say, I want my free parking pass.
Flashing
Time's up.
Bill.
Thank you.
I'm glad you just are so calm.
Hey, I'm an Irishman. I got to get my 2 cents in when I can. Don't forget, keep holy the holy day, March 17th.
Oh, no. I thought it was Ash Wednesday or something. Okay. We don't have any boring citizens in our village. Okay. Laura Taylor. Name and address, Laura, please.
Hi, my name is Laura Taylor, and I live at 2715 North Windsor Drive, Arlington Heights, up in Northgate Subdivision. My associate is passing around all these packets, and basically I'm going to read from a prepared statement. I would love Arlington Heights to take into consideration other methods to tackling this issue, including preventative care. We should be thinking of options that would, over time, replace the ash tree stock, not just eliminate it all at once. First, there are, of course, everybody else has mentioned it too, there are other towns in the northern suburbs who've also been treating their ash trees. Included in this packet of information is an article that was printed today about the Schomburg plan that mimics what we're trying to do in Northgate. In addition, I have learned of other subdivision areas within Arlington Heights that have already done the preventive approach, St. Edna's Catholic Church, Heritage Park, Sam Moser, and some individual condo associations. Finally, there are a number of people in other areas of Arlington Heights, Northgate, Lake Arlington, the Care of Trees, Cedar Glen, who are working hard to save their neighborhood trees in their areas. The preventative treatment measures are not considered experimental anymore, as they've been met with good success. Overall, the cost of preventive treatment at an average of $100 per tree with multiple applications over the next 10 years would cost virtually the same as chopping down a tree at $500. If the tree does not die, the village actually saves the cost of a replacement tree. When we're discussing the $11 million bond to cut and replace the tree, we're actually referring to the money as hard dollars, money in your hand. What I'd like Arlington Heights to take into consideration is the soft dollars, money that will be incurred by other departments because of the actions of the hard dollar. Some examples of the soft dollars are also included in this package, such as an increase potentially in crime, thereby requiring the police department to have to answer more calls. I have a study over here that was done by the University of Illinois, Chicago, and Chicago itself was one of the 3 cities that was used in this study. And it basically summarized, said, The smaller the canopy, the higher incidences of crime. And the professor said I could pass out as many copies as I wanted to. He wants to be able to hear what comes out of this meeting to him. Also, the Public Works Department is also going to be impacted by flood control because of the runoff and stuff of the water, because of the trees. There could also be structural damage to homes that are incurred because the trees won't be there, unfortunately, to block debris flying in wind. Yes, the tree might suffer some more, but that's what it is. Also, last but not least, is an increase in utility costs such as gas heating your home and electrical for your air conditioning costs because the trees block wind and provide shade cooling. Basically, it impacts us all over the place, and it's not just going to be the Public Works Department. I can only hope that what I brought to the table this evening will invoke some thought by you guys to consider other methods in addressing the EAB issue other than to chop and replace. To quote Ben Franklin, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I made it. 3 minutes.
Whoa, yeah. That is, you practiced.
Thank you. This is what I do in my spare time.
Thank you for all this information, Laura. And your Vanna White there that passed everything out. She did a great job. Finally, from cards I got, I don't know if there were any more, Ed Mikowski?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Edward Mikowski at 2619 North Forest Lane, and I happened to go last month to the Northgate Association. I'm in the new Northgate, so in one of the other sections, but I also did a prepared speech because I wanted to share with you that I was surprised last Tuesday. It was the Daily Herald that I heard you were looking for $11 million, because what I've heard as a citizen is there's no money to take care of the trees, but then when I hear you're putting $11 million to take them out, that's what's motivating me to be here tonight. I've been a resident of Arlington Heights for 28 years, and I live on the 2600 block of Forest Lane. 90% of my trees on my block, of the 41 trees, are ash. Most of the trees are 39 years old, and we ended up measuring them, and they're 24 inches in diameter, reaching a height of 30 to 40 feet. What I wanted to share with you is, when I turned 50, I got a card. 50 isn't old if you're a tree. So I think what I've heard a couple of people say is these trees are in the end of life. I think we need to rethink that. Finally, when you look down my street, the most amazing part is the canopy the tree does across the street and meets in the middle. Then also, I'm in a 2-story colonial. Our trees even meet side to side now, and so I don't have to heat and cool the upper stairs of my house like I used to when I moved in. Because when I moved in, I was having $300 a month air conditioning bills because we had no trees. So to take these trees out now will be a dramatic cost to my home expenses. So my owners, the homeowners on the block, I have walked around the last 3 days since they put the ribbons on Friday and tried to get my neighbors involved. 9 of the 24 homeowners have already said, yes, I will pay for this. But the number one question is, why isn't the village paying for it? So the concern we're having is, why are we doing this as a peanut butter? I'm spreading it on all the trees the same way. So my first point was, I don't lump all the ash trees in together. I think what I saw in the Schaumburg, and someone already mentioned it, if a tree is over 20 inches in diameter, they're calling it a priority tree, and the village is paying to treat it. The other one is that if a tree is in front of a homeowner's property, not a park or a street, why aren't they being treated separately from the other trees? I think our home values will be amazingly touched. The aesthetics will also be important. The quality of life, they mentioned crime, and that's the other thing. If you take these trees out, it somehow magnifies and becomes a crime-ridden area because the trees are gone. Don't understand that, but it's psychological. The other one, it provides comfort. If you go down a tree-lined street, there's nothing more beautiful than that. Finally, I'd like you to go back and relook at the way you're budgeting. I think pushing this to the taxpayers versus using funds or even asking for an increase in taxes, because my next point will cover that. I feel very hard-pressed to say this. When I saw the news article that said the People's Choice Program, what I have found I've had to do is inventory my trees, collect the names, addresses, emails, and phone numbers of my neighbors, find a method of communication, whether it's email or phone or walking up. I even thought, do I have to open my own website? I know the Northgate did. Do I have to do that? So then you're asking citizens to start doing all this when the village probably could do it a lot easier and more efficient. Then, do I have to sign an agreement or contract with my neighbors so that they pay not even now, but the next couple of years? So that's the other thing that we're looking at. So then do I go out and contract a vendor for the actual installation of the insecticide, collect the funds, pay the vendors, tell the village which trees I've just treated so that they know which ones are done, and then every 2 years do this over again. So I'm not comfortable thinking that it's an easy program to implement to let the people do it when I think this is an organized thing that needs to be done. And last but not least, what I also notice is the last line of the page on the website. These trees cannot be replaced one by one. And why? Because you won't be taking the roots out. So I walked around this afternoon and said, our 41 trees will only be 35, because when you start removing the ones that are right in front of a house or between driveways, there's no way a replacement tree can go in there, so you're going to also reduce the number of trees available in the thing. So I want to end in with an analogy. I'm asking for your help. It's like asking for the help from the fire department to put out my tree while it's burning versus wait until it's all done and then take it out. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for the analogy. Pretty good. I have no other cards. Were there any other residents that wish to address the EAB? Okay. We do have a motion that was recommended by Trustee Glasgow and seconded by
Trustee Breyer.
Trustee Breyer, was it? Yeah.
Yes.
And any other comments from trustees at this time? That was in regards to grabbing some money from the general fund to put into an EAB fund, hiring a forestry person to manage the inventory that's been referenced by many of the speakers, and to plan for a bond issue, as was also mentioned, $11.5 million in 2013. Anybody feel there needs to be any clarity to that? Trustee Breyer?
Well, just so the public realizes, the money is there only for the most part because we're borrowing it, so that there, pardon the phrase, there isn't a money tree out there in the back in the parking lot to pay for all of this. This is borrowed money. But I would hope at some point, because I think we do need to go forward with this motion, that we do consider some cost-sharing program. And it appears to me that the residents are finding literature discussing studies out there that seem to indicate that the vaccination, if that's the right term, seems to be producing reasonable results. And I would hope that somehow if the passage of time bears that out, that we do look more towards preserving some of these larger trees that are an asset, as opposed to taking them out if they're suitable for remaining. And perhaps staff could discuss a little of this, because it's sort of like vaccinating a person, and you live and avoid the disease. And it appears that as the literature is coming out, that there is a history somewhat of that happening. And I think we need to encourage preservation if in fact it is feasible and will produce desirable results.
Trustee Farwell?
Well, I think the last several meetings we've talked about this, they've been committees of the whole, they really haven't been televised. So I'm wondering if now might be a perfect opportunity, because it's being televised this evening, it's going to be on a number of times in the next several weeks. If the staff can't say in the form of a public announcement right now, what is the ribbons program, so that people can understand it? And maybe, Tom, we've all talked a number of times, we understand the 11.5 million bond issue in 2013. But maybe now might be a good time for a full explanation of that so that the public knows why it's a 2013 and where that money is coming from and the fact that it's borrowed, but how did we come up with that number? And also I did want to highlight one that, this is still a pro-preservation program. We really want to preserve what we have. We're not just going like is it Wilmette, they're just knocking them all down, and Buffalo Grove, they're just knocking them all down. Here we're trying to preserve first and knock down only what we believe has to be knocked down. That, and also this is a beginning step. This is not carved in stone and something that we cannot tweak as we go along. And lastly, maybe the administration can comment on, if we are creating this additional position, can there be more activity on the village's part in aiding the communities to create the websites and collect the information, since we do have a number of public service avenues in which we can broadcast and collect.
Mr. Dixon, I see you want to address some of the concerns that were expressed by Trustee Farwell.
I think Trustee Farwell's comments were very well taken and do provide kind of an outline for some explanation of where we've been, where we are, and where we may be headed. Tonight's discussion was prompted by just one of the 6 directives that the board gave us late last year. And last Monday night, the 13th, the board at a committee of the whole focused on the 4th directive, which was to come up with a funding plan to handle the village's costs as we deal with these 13,000 parkway trees. The ribbons were placed because in the aftermath of mailing our brochure to all the residents, and that will be remailed with water bills over the next couple of months, we were not getting any calls or comments about EAB. The village had taken steps to reach out, to communicate, to put this in everybody's mailbox, but we weren't hearing anything. Public Works decided, and I give them credit for their initiative, to put ribbons on trees that are ashes. That doesn't mean if the tree has a ribbon that it's coming down, it just delineates that it's an ash. And as a result of that, we are getting calls. What's the ribbon for? What does it mean? So forth and so on. We're not sure what it means in terms of these trees until they leaf out in the spring, or don't leaf out. In terms of the 11.5 million, that is for a program solely funded by the village for both removal and replacement. I heard mention here today of this, or this evening, of this story about Schaumburg. Just every town seems to have a slightly different program, but Schaumburg's program, residents will be given the option to participate in a 50-50 cost-sharing program with the village to replant their parkway trees. Arlington Heights is proposing to replant at no cost to the residents, no direct cost. Certainly we all pay through our taxes. Mr. Keeney has found a window in our debt service where this bond issue will not have a tax impact because other bonds will be going off the levy at that time.
Mr. Dixon, I just want to interject here. Can you explain why we have to wait till 2013? It's
Well,
that window, and explain it for the general public.
I'll let Mr. Keeney do that in a moment, Mayor, when I'm done. And I think as Trustee Farwell pointed out, this is the direction the board gave us, and this is what we're working on now, but it is subject to change. If, compelling literature comes forth, if our experience here is different in terms of the pace of this thing, all this says is to plan for a bond issue in 2013. It doesn't say put the wheels in motion right now. So I think we are in a position where we could tweak, as Trustee Farwell mentioned, as we go along if circumstances warrant. Finally, to think that we're going to be able to manage this without adding one staff person, I think is unrealistic. And even if we went into a total cost-sharing program for retention of every tree, we'd still need somebody to work on that. I mean, it's great to come in here and say you don't need another staff person, but when you look at a 10% reduction, 47 positions over the last 3 years, frankly, I differ with that. So let Mr. Keeney comment on the 11.5 and why it's important now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dixon. In regards to the $11.5 million, the village has a total debt service levy that we pay each year, and it's based on a series of bond issues that we have outstanding at the current time. There is a window of opportunity with the 2014 tax levy. That's when the overall debt service levy of the village goes down by about $1.5 million, and that's for principal and interest on an annual basis. That's more than enough to cover an $11.5 million bond issue for the removal and replacement of the 13,000 ash trees that we're talking about. There was also a question at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week in regards to, is treatment a maintenance cost or is treatment a capital cost? In answer to that question, I did contact our legal bond counsel, Chapman and Cutler, and they said clearly the removal and replacement of the trees is a capital cost and can be used to finance the removal and replacement. However, the treatment is a maintenance cost, and you cannot use bond issue money to pay for that kind of cost. To pay for any chemical treatment, we would have to look for another way through our operating funds, general funds, which we've had a really difficult time with the last 3 years during the recession. So I hope that provides some clarity there.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Tom, can you also explain the rationale for the $2 million and, how that's being carved out and what it's going to be used for also?
As far as the source of the $2 million, as Mr. Dixon had just mentioned, we have cut back quite a bit on staffing levels in the village, 47 positions, about 10% of our workforce over the last 3 years. That has saved quite a bit of money for the village. In addition to that, our revenues are now just starting to improve compared to what they have been over the last few years. We've had sinking sales and sinking income taxes. Well, they're starting to hit the bottom and starting to increase slowly. We anticipate that they'll continue to move up slowly, not quickly. Another good thing this past year was the winter. We had a really good winter, and we were able to save some money in terms of Public Works overtime on snow removal. So that really created what we're projecting to be this $2.5 million surplus this year. It's not something that we can count on year to year, but we are seeing it this year. And the thought process is to use this money to start to combat the EAB as it waves through the village. We're going to start to see some costs, and the proposal is to hire a part-time or a full-time, temporary full-time person while this EAB crisis is hit, and to start getting this set up in the meantime.
And just to add, I believe, and then the $2 million that we're allocating is strictly for the replacement and removal
It would be
of the trees
it'd be
that
for
we would get
replacement,
started on early.
removal. We can also use it for the wages and benefits for the part-time or the full-time position, as well as any marketing efforts that we have.
Thank you.
Trustee Blackwood?
Tom, I have a question. If now the general fund money is not part of the bond, so could we use that money also for partial treatment?
That would be up to the board.
Okay.
But ongoing treatment is going to be a multi-million-dollar cost.
Is that a hand, Trustee Scaletta?
It is. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I think it was back in December when we talked about the subject well, I don't want to say for the first time, but for the first time when we realized that there was going to be a huge impact to our village. And at that time, I recall that we didn't have the funding, not that we really have it now because we're talking about taking out a loan, but at that point, we were talking about replacing one for every 3 trees. And so now we're looking at something 1-to-1. So we've definitely come a long way. And we instituted the People's Choice Program because there were many people out there that said that they wanted to keep their tree and they wanted to treat their tree and they didn't want their tree removed. And as the gentleman mentioned earlier tonight, that definitely offers a savings to him for his air conditioning. Someone else mentioned crime. So, I mean, there's a variety of benefits of why somebody might want to keep their tree. And at this, and so I'm not saying that staff shouldn't investigate, but at the same time, we have to be careful that, that we've had people already invest in their trees, and they're going to be like, well, why did I invest in the tree if now you're going to pay for it, and I feel like I got cheated. So I do have a concern there. I would say that we do need a full-time person. We need someone that just completely focuses on that. Our public works is always going in 10 different directions. There's either a problem with water main breaks, or we're having to do snow plowing, or we have to do some landscaping. I mean, they're always going in different directions, and I think that it's important that if we're going to try and really tackle this issue, that we definitely have a person that focuses on it, and that's what their job responsibility is, and that we really can learn a lot from that person in the administrative position that they're in. As I mentioned, I think that staff should continue to investigate it, and I think with this motion that they can continue to do that. And when we talk about the $2 million, we plan to repay that $2 million out of the bond that we're going to apply in 2013. And for those of you that weren't here at the last meeting, one of the reasons why we don't get the bond now is because if we sit on the money too long, we're gaining interest on that, and that's illegal. And you had a fancy word for it, which was?
Arbitrage.
Arbitrage, there you go. So I think that a lot of the points that were made tonight are very important, and I think that we should continue to look at whether or not we can save some of our trees, but how we go about doing that. And I'd like to let everyone know that the Public Works Department meant no disrespect to anybody by putting pink ribbons on there, because that pink that they used is a pink ribbon that they use often to inform people of issues that are going on in their area that have to do with construction. And so no disrespect to breast cancer or any of the funds. This was something that was done because that was the ribbon they had in stock. Just as I would imagine people from with Irish culture might say, oh boy, they're putting green ribbons on the trees. What does that mean? So no disrespect by our Public Works Department. They're just trying to do the best they can, and they definitely got everyone's attention. So that's a good thing. And I think I give them a lot of credit because they did send out brochures, and people looked at them and wondered, do I have an ash tree, but really didn't act on it. And now they drive up and down their street, and they may see one or two, or they may see an entire tree-lined street. So kudos to Public Works for going the extra mile to make sure that people are aware of what kind of tree they have. I'm comfortable with the motion. I would encourage, and hopefully with support of my fellow trustees, that we do continue to investigate whether or not it makes sense to treat our trees. I believe at the last meeting, I know for a fact at the last meeting, I asked about, why don't we have a cost-sharing program? And as it was explained by Public Works, when we look at the $11.5 million, that was based on removal and replacement. And if we started treating some of these trees, there would be an increased cost to that fund. I would like to continue to look at that and see if there are viable options. We're learning so much each week, or each time we discuss this, we learn a little bit more. We've even learned that these trees are lasting longer than they were intended originally, or as much as the textbooks say. And people definitely like their trees, and if I had an ash tree, I'd want to treat it. We had someone send us an email saying I spend, $150 a month on landscaping. Why wouldn't I spend $150 on my tree every other year? So I think that there's a lot of viable options out there, and we should continue to look at them.
Thank you, Trustee Scaletta.
Just one thing.
An additional comment, Trustee Farwell?
Just one last thing. Mr. Jameson had a study that he referred to that I don't think we necessarily had the benefit of, and we were wondering just a couple weeks ago what lessons we might be able to learn coming out of Michigan, because it just ravaged, Michigan's forestry. So maybe as we go forward, if Mr. Jameson and Drew can share the information coming out of the University of Michigan, that'd be great. I'm sorry, Michigan State. Wow, that was a big city.
One's green and one's blue. Okay.
If you're in Michigan,
I picked up on a comment as well from Mr. Jameson, and what's happened in the last, I think we've been talking about EAB for, in my thoughts, 3 years. And it was mainly in other communities, and it hadn't impacted us. And then all of a sudden, in this past year, it's raised its, should I say, ugly head. And it is a problem. This past December, this board, because it's been trying to be very responsive to our citizens, passed a zero levy increase. trying to hold the line, given the economic conditions of our nation and our households. The thing that I find different, and from the comment tonight from Mr. Jameson, is that previously, many meetings 2.5 years ago, they said, well, you can treat them, but there's no guarantee that the treatment will work, and you'll lose the tree anyway. Then we're learning that you have to treat for many, many years. It's not just a 2 or 3 or 5 year application. But now I heard tonight that I think the percentage was 90% effective. And so obviously the industry is working hard on trying to find a preventative measure. Unfortunately, is it going to be in time, and can we find a way to save our trees? And there's been a variety of approaches from our homeowners groups. It's obviously an issue, and if nothing else, I think each of us have learned a whole lot more, not only about this particular tree, but the importance of this tree. I thought the example of cost savings in energy, the debris, and these are topics that are, and I see our chairman from our environmental commission is in the audience tonight. They keep working on all kinds of environmental issues, and obviously this EAB is one of those. Just as been indicated by trustees this evening, we're still working on this. This motion here came after a great deal of study and back and forth with staff and with experts, and tonight we learned more. But I think if it's in concurrence, we can call the question on this particular motion. Is there, Trustee Glasgow?
I just wanted to say, for this and all the other reasons that we talked about during the committee of the whole, this is the reason that I originally made this motion. I believe the canopy is a very valuable asset, and we're putting aside some capital projects that really need to be done for the village in exchange for beginning this process. This is one of the reasons that we in government take things a little more slowly than in the private sector, because we have learned so much. We've learned a lot during the course of the time that we've been up here about the EAB, and it has changed a great deal. We've set aside this money, fortunately, because of the finance department doing such a wonderful job in the mild winter that we ended up experiencing. The attrition of workers in public works will help to phase in the specialized EAB forestry person. So there's not additional costs to the village, because you guys have asked us to cut stuff. We've done that. This is a good motion, and it's a good start. And as we go on, we're going to learn more, and you guys are going to teach us more, and we're going to learn more from staff. This is a nice way to start this off. And with that, I would call the question.
Voice vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. My thanks to all of the citizens who've been doing their independent research. Obviously, we like our trees. Are we a community of tree huggers? We sure are right now, because the cost of losing those trees is immense to each and every one of us, to the homeowner, to the neighborhood, to the village. So I think we all are in unity of let's do what we can to save together and keep learning as we move forward. And we can always look at new information that we can get. We now move to item B, and I see Michael still waiting patiently. This is a report of our committee of the whole meeting held earlier this evening, where we did have a motion, and Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move, as I did earlier this evening, to recommend to the Liquor Commissioner the issuance of a Class E liquor license to Sadie Investments, 2 LLC, doing business as Arlington Heights Garibaldi's, located at 1960 North Arlington Heights Road in the Annex Shopping Center.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Farwell. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And that's news to everybody. Up near between Rand and Palatine Road, Garibaldi's are returning back to Arlington Heights. and we'll look forward to their opening within the next few weeks. So thank you and good luck. That concludes the report of our Committee of the Whole meeting. We now move to the consent agenda. Are there any trustees who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Any trustee who wishes to remove an item for discussion? Any citizen in the audience wish to remove an item? These are all the items on page 5 and 6. Seeing no indication, could we have a motion for approval of the
Move
consent
approval.
agenda?
Second.
Motion by trustee Glasgow, seconded by trustee Rosenberg. Roll call.
Trustee Glasgow?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
Trustee Hayes?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
Trustee Breyer?
Yes.
Trustee Farwell?
Yes.
President Mulder?
Yes. We now are on page 7. No new business tonight. We move down to petitions and communications, and I simply want to congratulate our own trustee Glasgow, not him, but his daughter, for participation in the basketball team at Rolling Meadows High School. 40 years it's taken for the girls' basketball team to win the MSL championship. And his daughter Alexis has been a big part of that. And are you a proud dad?
I'm still trying to figure out who scored the winning basket, but as Fremd was for a while, but I'm very proud. She did a great job. The whole team did a great job. First time in 38 years that they bring home an MSL title. That's a real big accomplishment. The boys won the MSL East. They play Wednesday night against Schaumburg at Schaumburg, and hopefully they'll also bring home an MSL title. It'll be the first time ever that the boys and girls had won at the same time.
It's a lucky,
Thank you, Mayor.
lucky thing, and probably, depending on where you reside, you probably don't think, well, there's a lot of Arlington Heights kids going to Rolling Meadows High School. I'm the parent of 3 graduates there myself, so some of our younger members are still there. So, congratulations to Alexis, who happens to be a commissioner for the Village of Arlington Heights, serving on our youth commission, so we appreciate that, too. Any other items for petitions and communications from trustees? Trustee Glasgow?
Madam Mayor, in discussions with the Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce, they wanted me to pass on to the village board and to others the new partnership program that they have with Save Wave Energy to help members of the Arlington Heights community save up to 28% off their monthly electric bills. Currently, the ComEd small business rate is 0.07988 kilowatts per hour. With the plan that the Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce has worked out, it's now 0.0499. And any business in Arlington Heights can end up signing up for this. They just simply need to contact the Chamber of Commerce at 847-253-1703. That's 847-253-1703. They will give you the information on how to get involved in this. If you use roughly about 1,500 kilowatts per hour annually, you could save up to about $300 per year. This goes along with the similar program that the village has put together with the energy aggregation that is on the municipal ballot. This is solely for small businesses, though, and if you want to participate, please contact the Chamber of Commerce. They'd be excited to hear from you, and I think you'd be excited to save some money.
That's a March primary election.
March 20th, isn't it?
Is March 20th is the date. There is an opportunity that residents have a chance to voice their vote for an opportunity to have reduced utility costs for electricity.
And they're doing this now for small businesses, so they can call right now if they want to get
businesses
involved.
can, yeah.
The businesses can. The residents, you'll have to wait and vote on the 20th.
Any other comments? We go to the report from the village manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, we have a citizen who's requesting a variance from Section 16-103 of our municipal code. Matt Scallon of 405 South Walnut is proposing to keep 3 chickens on his property. Currently, that section that I mentioned does not allow the keeping of any animals other than those customarily kept as pets, but it does provide for a variance application before the President Board. Such a variance may be granted if it's found by the board that granting would, 1, not substantially impair the value of the surrounding properties, 2, not detrimentally affect the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. 3, not cause injury to the animals proposed to be kept. And 4, not alter the character of the neighborhood or result in a public or private nuisance. Prior to presenting the variation request to the board, the code calls for the applicant to notify all property owners within 250 feet of the location for which the variance is requested. If 20% or more of those owners object, a 2/3 majority of the board members must vote in favor of the variance for it to be granted. As of February 15, the village had not received any written objections to the proposed variation. Staff has not made a recommendation in this matter. We have reviewed the variance application, and if the board chooses to grant the variation, we would suggest the following conditions. 1, the chicken coop and the enclosure be allowed only in the rear yard, a minimum of 10 feet from any lot line. 2, hens only shall be allowed. 3, no more than 3 hens shall be allowed. 4, the premises must be maintained in a sanitary manner so as to not attract vermin or insects or create objectionable odors. And 5, a building and electrical permit application will be required for the coop.
Anything else, Mr. Dixon?
Not at this time.
Comments from trustees? Petitioner, if you could please come forward, identify yourself.
My name is Matt Scallon. I reside at 405 South Walnut Avenue.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
Questions for the petitioner? Do you have any opening statements or requests that you wish to make?
Yes, I'd just like to make an opening statement. With me this evening is Jennifer Murtoff. Jennifer is an experienced chicken consultant and a resource for educational information for anyone interested in or concerned about raising backyard chickens. The Chicago Tribune recently did a nice article this past Sunday about Jennifer's services. Jennifer is here to answer any questions I may not be able to answer. My wife Terry Scallon and I are requesting a variance from section 16-103 of the Arlington Heights Municipal Code, which if granted would allow us to keep chickens, 3 hens only, in the backyard of our property at 405 South Walnut Avenue. The hens would be cared for as pets and be a source of fresh eggs. They would be kept in a 4-foot deep by 8-foot wide by 7-foot high, predator-proof, custom chicken coop I would build myself per instructions I have purchased from coop designer carpenter Dennis Harrison Noonan of Madison, Wisconsin. The chicken feed would be stored in our basement in a small galvanized steel trash receptacle with a flat top secured lid. At no time would any chicken feed be stored in our garage or anywhere outside where it could be subject to rodent infestation. The coop would be outfitted with a top-hanging feeder as well as a water feeder. I personally would clean the coop 1 to 2 times a week. The chicken droppings would be used for a limited amount of composting in our backyard, and any leftover droppings would be given to a chicken owner that would desire them. I would build or purchase a compost bin that would be placed either behind our garage or in the northeast corner of our backyard or wherever the village deemed appropriate. Our chicken coop would sit no closer than 14 feet from our north property fence line. 10 feet is code. It would be positioned in front of our 18-foot wide by 11-foot high by 6-foot deep wall of evergreen bushes. The left side of the coop would sit 12 feet from the back of our house. My wife Terry and I have chosen this location for the coop as it would be easy to access from our back door for regular checks on the hens and to retrieve eggs. The coop would be concealed from our neighbor to the north, the Garoppolos, in the U-shaped cluster of our tall evergreens and flanking bushes. In the winter months, we would like to install a heat lamp in the roosting box and a second heat lamp, if needed, in the enclosed run. We would also provide a heated base for the water feeder to prevent their water supply from freezing. I also plan to install removable plexiglass panels in the wired section of the frames to prevent the accumulation of snow in the coop, as well as to protect against cold drafts. The distance from the back of the coop to our neighbor's house to the north, the Garoppolos, is approximately 55 feet. The distance from the right side of our coop to our back fence, our east property line, would be 60 feet. The distance from the right side of our coop to our neighbor's house directly to the east, the Schnaudagles, would be approximately 115 feet. And lastly, the distance from our coop to our opposite side fence, our south property line, would be 48 feet, and the distance from our coop to our neighbor's house to the south, John Leahy, would be approximately 61 feet. I have response to the 4 criteria of Section 16-103, if you'd like me to read those.
Please.
Okay. Not substantially impair the value of the surrounding property. Having 3 hens in our backyard would not, I feel, substantially impair the value of the surrounding property, as hens are usually quiet, more so than a barking dog. The 1 to 2 times a week cleaning of the coop would prevent any unpleasant odor. Would not detrimentally affect the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. I've requested and received a letter from Dr. Peter S. Sakas of Niles Animal Hospital and Bird Medical Center stating chickens raised in the fashion planned by Terry and I are no health risk at all to others. The letter also states that chickens do not carry nor can they contract the rabies virus. They have done well with the proper husbandry measures we'll be taking, and there have been absolutely no disruptions of the neighborhoods. Dr. Sakas closes his letter stating he wholeheartedly supports our efforts. Dr. Sakas is avian certified. Would not cause injury to the animals proposed to be kept. Terry and I would take care of our 3 hens in the same devoted manner as we did for our black Labrador Rocky of 12 years, now deceased. The clean, attractive, and roomy coop, our commitment to being responsible pet owners, as well as good neighbors, would provide the best possible living conditions for our 3 hens. Would not alter the character of the neighborhood or result in a public or private nuisance. The 3 hens would not alter the character of the neighborhood or result in a public or private nuisance, as they would be confined to the 4x8 open run area of the coop during the day when my wife Terry and I are at work. In the evening, they would be confined in the roosting box. Only when one or both of us or a responsible adult, in the event we are out of town, are in the backyard, would we let them out of the coop to free range in our fenced-in backyard where we can keep an eye on them. At the end of every free range session, I would clean up the chicken droppings with a pooper scooper. The free range sessions are important to maintain the health of the chickens. It keeps them happy, being able to forage for insects, worms, mice, etc. The free ranging would be the equivalent of a dog owner walking his or her dog, except the chicken droppings would fall exclusively and be cleaned up in our backyard. In addition to mailing the notice of public hearing letters to property owners within 250 feet of our property, I have personally spoken to all 4 of our neighbors whose property borders ours, and all, except Mr. Garoppolo, as of yesterday afternoon, which I'll speak to in a moment, have given their okay to Terry and I having the 3 hens in our backyard. They have expressed excitement for us as well. I have also spoken to 4 of our neighbors across the street, and they, too, are okay with the 3 hens and are excited for us. Mr. Garoppolo, Terry and I discussed in our home yesterday his concern of the chicken droppings, and he indicated that my original request to have the coop 7 feet from our property line was too close to his yard. He is concerned about the odor of chicken droppings. I indicated to Mr. Garoppolo that I have since learned from the village that the village code for any animal run is 10 feet, and further explained that our coop would sit no closer than 14 feet from his property line. I also gave Mr. Garoppolo a copy of Dr. Sakas's letter indicating chickens raised in the fashion planned by the Scallons are no health risk at all to others. I am open to invite Mr. Garoppolo and any other concerned or interested party to attend a backyard chicken seminar that Terry and I can host in our home with Jennifer, who's here tonight. If the board approves our variance request, Terry and I would acquire the day-old chicks towards the end of this month or early March when they become available at the Farm and Fleet Department store in Woodstock, Illinois, or at the Belmont Feed and Seed in Chicago. We would raise the 3 chicks indoors in a temperature-controlled brooder, and in 2 months or so, when they are ready, would move them to the backyard coop. I would like to answer any questions you may have.
First, I go to the board. I do have a request from someone in the audience, but I'll start with the board. Trustee Hayes.
A question for the health department, I guess, or whoever else might be able to answer the question from the staff. Do we have any other existing chicken coops in the backyards of any of our residents today?
Not to our knowledge, Trustee Hayes.
Okay. I have some personal knowledge of chicken coops. My brother-in-law has one at his rural residence down in Kansas, and they wanted to do the same thing that you're doing. They had bought 15 young chicks and raised them to actually sell eggs and use them themselves, but unfortunately a raccoon was able to get into the coop, and now they're down to 2 or 3. So you mentioned that your coop is predator-proof, and I'm wondering if you can explain that and how
Sure.
you and your neighbors can be assured that raccoons and other predators are not going to frequent your neighborhood because of the presence of these chickens.
Sure. The wire that would be used on the coop is a 14-gauge steel wire, 1-inch square, and the bottom would be outfitted with wire that would cover the 10-inch inside perimeter of the base. So a predator would have to come in through the base, pass 10 inches underground before they got inside where the wire would end there. My wife and I can also put bricks around the perimeter of the coop to further prevent animals from digging and coming in.
Yeah, certainly if this was an isolated case, I would have no objection. I'm a little concerned about setting a precedent for a residential village. My brother-in-law's situation, he's got a couple of acres in a rural area in Kansas, and I just think I'm not sure that this is appropriate for a residential bedroom community, but I'm interested to hear the thoughts of my colleagues.
Trustee Glasgow?
I likewise have some experience with chickens. My mother's family were chicken farmers. They had 30,000 chickens on their property. I have some questions for you that go along the same lines as Trustee Hayes, and that is, raccoons, skunks, they get into the hen house and they cause some ruckus. I mean, I'm not going to begrudge you for wanting some fresh eggs, but I have some concerns about vermin and rodents getting into and being attracted to the area. There is no vermin-proof chicken coop. It just isn't. It doesn't exist. And when you're inside, short of having something out there guarding the chickens, it's eventually going to happen. That's one of my concerns, which you answered through Trustee Hayes, what you're going to be doing. The second one is the smell of the droppings, which you ended up talking about on your initial discussion. But I have some concerns because I know firsthand the pungent odor it can lead to. And, the fact that you have to clean those coops roughly about 4 times a year in order to make sure that you sterilize everything. But one of the biggest problems that I have, and I would really like to hear what your answer is chickens carry histoplasmosis, and, their droppings carry histoplasmosis. And you're talking about utilizing that not only as fertilizer, but compost and spreading that out. Every case that I've seen of this particular problem has come from chicken coops, and chicken coops that weren't well kept, or they were overrun with feces, or even if it's not overrun with feces, getting into the dirt, that it can dry out, the dust kicks up, and histoplasmosis is here in Illinois just as it is all throughout the Ohio River Valley and most of central United States. How do you plan on protecting not only your neighbors, but your 2 houses north of Wayside? How do you plan on protecting those people from drifting or blowing dust, and from a kid who may have a compromised immune system from getting histoplasmosis?
I think the cleaning of the coop 1 to 2 times a week would prevent that from happening. Jennifer, is that your experience, that even 1 to 2 times?
Jennifer, if you want to please come to the microphone and give your name and address as well, and then we can better record your comments.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Murtoff, and I live in Oak Park at 225A Washington Boulevard, apartment 3W. I'm an urban chicken consultant. I've been assisting people with backyard flocks for the last 3 years, both in Chicago and in the suburbs. And I have do presentations, workshops, classes, do home visits. I just came from a home visit before coming here today. My qualifications for urban chicken consulting are I grew up on a farm in South Central Pennsylvania. I had chickens from age 10 until I was in college. I'm also an owner of exotic fowl. I've had parakeets and Alexandrine parakeet. I've done a number of avian vet visits, learning a lot about avian medicine and also a lot about urban chicken keeping. So with response to Trustee Glasgow's comment about the large-scale their large-scale poultry farms, in my experience, I too grew up in a rural area, and a number of my neighbors had very large-scale flocks. What Mr. Scallen is proposing is a small-scale operation. When you get that many birds concentrated in that small of an area, yeah, you're going to have odor issues. But when you have 3 birds in a backyard coop, and you have someone who's continually cleaning out the coop, removing any waste matter, you're not going to have the odors. We do tours in the city of different coops every fall. It's called Hennapalooza Coop Tour. And people are amazed that you just don't smell the coop coming up to it. The one I was in today, you would never know there was a coop in the backyard. If you remove the droppings, don't let the fecal matter build up, then the ammonia concentration won't build up. And actually, if the ammonia concentration builds up to the point that you can smell it, you're going to be doing damage to your bird's lungs. And Mr. Scallen has demonstrated that he would be a very responsible owner, would care very well for his birds. And so therefore, I submit that your point is valid if he's going to have a large-scale poultry operation, but I believe on this small scale, you wouldn't notice a difference in odor. With regard to histoplasmosis, there again, larger scale operations, the birds are kept confined, they're kept in very stressful conditions. It's a breeding ground for bacteria. Also, the stressed birds tend to, they serve as a breeding ground for bacteria themselves. Their immune systems are weakened. If we have a natural coop where the birds are allowed to free range, where they're allowed to run free, where they have sufficient square footage per bird, and I've looked at Mr. Scallen's coop plans, they would provide more than enough space for 3 birds to live in. Those birds would not be susceptible to histoplasmosis like the birds in a large-scale operation. We see pigeons in the city. There's possibility of histoplasmosis there. They're also living in substandard conditions, whereas if we've got a responsible chicken owner who's willing to take measures to care for his birds properly, then I would say that would not be an issue.
I respect your opinion, and mine just differs from yours. And
Understand.
I know my kids wanted a rabbit at one point. Everybody was excited about the rabbit the first 6 weeks, and then things just kind of became things. And the rabbit went off to Rabbit Land at one of the local schools and became their class pet. And the kids were really excited about cleaning out the cage, but I really wasn't. So I understand as time goes by, sometimes, we're not as, excited about taking care of things. I know that you're a responsible guy, but I still have concerns that, I believe are valid with regard to the proximity to the school, with regard to the precedent that Trustee Hayes had stated. I understand why you want to get this. I just I have some real concerns about setting a bad precedent for this particular area. I think an urban area, such as Chicago, may be different from Arlington, but you've got lot lines, and you've got neighbors looking into the back of the yard, and you've got, I unfortunately know firsthand how chickens can tend to make a little more noise than you would want them to make, even if they are hens. I realize roosters are the ones that get up and crow in the morning, not the hens, but hens still make noise, and I don't know whether or not I would want that in my backyard if I were the next door neighbor. That's just my opinion. I'm one of 9. I'd also like to hear from some of my colleagues.
They cluck.
They do.
Chickens.
And I don't want to ruffle any feathers from
They have wings, too. Trustee Scaletta?
I also have experience with chickens, as I like to eat them.
We have an expert board here.
He eats them.
So I have lots of questions, and so I'll start with the petitioner and then kind of work my way through the staff. Do you have any previous experience working with chickens at all?
not working with chickens.
Okay, you've never owned chickens?
Never owned chickens, no.
And you've now changed your the layout of where you're gonna place these, so it'd be 14 feet off your property line?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you say that, one of the reasons that you want them is also to retrieve eggs, how many eggs would you possibly get from a hen each week?
One a day, so
One a day?
7, so about 21, up to 21 max.
Okay.
Ideal, I think.
And going over to staff, Mr. McAllister, with the Health Department, when you talk about, when they talk about they need to be maintained the premises must be maintained in a sanitary manner, so as not to attract vermin, insects, or to create objectionable odors, what's our remedy?
If we receive complaints, we'd have an environmental health officer go out and visit the property to see if it's being maintained.
And if it was found not to be in compliance?
Then we would talk to them about things they could do to improve cleaning of the pen. And if they did that and they came back and did follow-up inspections and they were maintaining the pen, we'd consider it in compliance. If not, then our options would be to issue a citation.
Okay. I think you're a really nice man, Mr. Scallon, but I'm trying to make sure that, whatever precedent we possibly do set tonight, that we have a way out of this. So it turns out that this was a great idea, but they don't keep up with it. I mean, at some point, are we able to repeal the variance if we found that this went on a regular basis and it was just more of a hassle than it was helpful to Mr. Scallon?
I would think that would be a legal question.
If it's a violation of a condition in the resolution.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I see that a building and electrical permit will be applied for. Let me back up. So when we talk about the sanitary, remember, are there routine inspections?
Only if we receive a complaint.
So
No different than if
we
somebody
would-
has dogs in their backyard, if they're not cleaning up after their dogs and we receive a complaint, we go out and inspect.
So even with a variance, there's nothing set that we go out on a annual, semi-annual basis?
No, there's not. Trustee Scaletta.
And we have our fire department here, so I guess I have a quick question for the fire department. Talking about placing a coop that's also going to be surrounded by trees, playing devil's advocate, what if there were a fire inside the hen house? Is there any danger to them catching onto the trees and possibly creating a problem for, the home that it's adjacent to or even the neighbors?
I don't think a coop of the size that the petitioner describes would give us any problems. I think we'd be able to take care of that before it went to the house or the neighbors, especially with the 14 feet from the lot line.
Okay. I just want to be sure that we don't approve something that we later regret. And Mr. Scallon, if you found that 1 to 2 times a week cleaning of the coop was not enough, you would up that based on direction from staff?
Oh, certainly.
And last question for the health department. From the Niles Animal Hospital and Bird Medical Center, it says chickens raised in the fashion planned by the Scallons are no health risk at all to others. And the last line says there's no risk of any transmission of disease organisms. Do you have anything to offer that's different than what was provided by the doctor?
I do not. Yeah, that's why we require the letter from the doctor, because that's their area of expertise.
I would just end with that I am somewhat concerned about the precedent that we set. Although I do appreciate what the petitioner is trying to do and would like to give it a chance. I'm just not sure where that puts this village board or this village as a whole of receiving more requests like this in how we protect the rest of the residents in the village from the unknown at this point. Thank you.
Trustee Farwell.
I have a couple questions, Mr. Scallon. First of all, There are 4 requirements in a variance, and you talk about them in your letter of January 1st. The first one was talking about, the first of the 4 is not substantially to impair the value of the surrounding property. And then you just, you state that you don't feel that it would substantially impair the value. Based on what? Did you get any sort of comparative market analysis of areas that have coops, say in like Oak Park or Evanston versus, and their resale values around, the surrounding home having the coop, or is this a personal opinion, or?
I haven't done any analysis of value of homes based on those that have coops and those that don't. I don't know.
Okay.
Any, but I don't have any.
I haven't heard anything to date, but I've not done.
I need you, Mr. Scanlon,
Yes.
when you make a response, get into the microphone.
Sure,
We just
sure.
had a beep that we can't pick you up on.
Okay, sure. No, I haven't done any analysis myself on homes that have coops versus those homes that don't, and the effect on the resale value.
Okay. And then on the fourth item that states that it would not alter the character of the neighborhood or result in a public or private nuisance. And you just kind of go on and you restate the proposal of how the hens would be cared for. But again, has there been any sort of study or professional study done or evidence provided to the staff or the administration that would support that fact?
I don't have anything unless, Jennifer, you might know.
Yeah. See, that's why, and I don't mean to be so direct, I really don't. But when a person comes to any municipality, when you're living in a neighborhood, when you're living in a community, and they're looking to do something outside the norm, outside the ordinances that we've set up to protect all of us as neighbors, there are requirements. And those requirements are set forth in a thoughtful manner so that we could say, well, okay, yeah, it's a variance, but it's not that much of a variance. It's evolutionary in nature as far as how ordinances might go. If you have enough variances, all of a sudden the ordinances might be tweaked a little bit or changed. That's why I was asking those 2 questions, to see whether there was something more than what was presented tonight that you might not have thought to provide in your packet.
I could do some research in that now that you've mentioned it. That particular point, it didn't come to mind to check. I tried to cover as many bases as
Sure.
I could to come here tonight.
Sure.
And be as thorough as I could, but that particular one, I would be willing to follow up on and provide information
If
to you.
I may, Trustee Farwell, in my experience in Oak Park is a fairly quiet, sleepy community. Many people don't know that their neighbors have chickens. So you mentioned to somebody that the neighbor 2 doors down has chickens, and they're surprised. So with the coop in the backyard, often it's just completely unobtrusive to the way of life. And I mean, that in my experience, it's been that they don't prevent a public or private nuisance unless the owners let them sort of run all over the neighborhood, which does not sound like it would be the case here.
No. And there are ordinances, be it for even domesticated animals for that even, as well. I've got to say, when I got this pack, in the packet on Friday, I did have to do a little bit of research and self-education myself. I didn't know before Friday afternoon that hens actually cluck, or in some websites they call it their singing, either to announce their egg laying or prior, during, or post laying, that it takes a 26-hour cycle to lay an egg, so that it's not always every time of every day, that they lay eggs on average about a 10-month cycle and then take 2 months off or something along that lines. I was kind of losing track of all the numbers.
The winter time is when they
Yeah.
lay the least number of eggs, I believe.
They don't count their eggs there. So that elicited more investigation for me. So I took a few hours and kind of surfing out, and I actually downloaded some of the songs and that they're talking about, or the clucking that they talk about, and I wouldn't want to live next to that personally. But I look at your location. I live on Ridge, it's a sub-artery. I understand that I'm going to expect more traffic on a sub-artery than I would even one block over, 160 feet away, being Fernandez, or over on your street, over in Walnut. I know that going in. My price of my home was probably, it's calculated in there somehow. You live on a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sacs are known to be quiet. That is a feature of a cul-de-sac. You know, when you pull down these homes for sale and it's quiet cul-de-sac location, you're on a cul-de-sac, you are, what, 2 or 3 houses, or 2 houses in from the turn itself, so you're like deep into the cul-de-sac. That kind of concerned me as far as your particular location that you're asking for this particular type of variance. And I know you talk about the idea of, maybe decibel-wise, the clucking or the singing, or the song itself might not be that much louder than a dog. But a dog is through time, has been accepted as a domesticated animal. It's something that I know if I'm going to live in a suburban community, I'm going to expect to hear a dog bark. I'm not going to expect a chicken to cluck. And there also been, and maybe it was because of certain ways they keep their hens, there have been a number of issues on the website to various websites that deal with backyardchickens.com was one of the prime sources of my information, but there were a number of informations where chicken owners, or hen owners I should say, were going and finding out why are their hens clucking so much, and there were definitely a noise issue, and these are people living in suburban areas, and that raised even more of a concern. We had another situation about a year ago that never really kind of came to the board, but I know we had a call on it through the health department, and that was a beekeeper in the neighborhood. This guy did all the homework, very well intentioned. It was an educational experiment, as well as to harvest raw honey. Did everything he thought was right to raise these bees, and it was promoted that these bees won't really harm or sting people unless agitated. They stung people. They're bees, Long story short, the gentleman was kind enough to voluntarily take the beehives down and not venture into that again, short of having an administrative body tend to it legally. He was a member of a community. He saw what was going on, realized it just wasn't worth it and it wasn't right to have, and he voluntarily took it down. I'm kind of equating, your request this evening to the beekeeping to a certain degree. It's pushing the envelope, but is it proper in our particular area? Are we spaced out enough, or are we just too tight? Is this something more for the rolling hills of Barrington where it's laid out? I know from Oak Park, I know it's 25 by 125 and 30 if you're lucky as far as the sites, but we're not Oak Park. Coyotes is another issue. We are an urban, suburban area that we're beginning to deal with more presence of coyotes, and coyotes ripping apart our domesticated animals. It happened over on 500 South Fernandez just a couple weeks ago. I don't think it was ever technically reported, but I know for a fact it happened. And 3 hens, to me, although it might be that the coop itself might keep the hen protected, I can't believe it wouldn't be an attraction to a coyote to at least attempt to get to the hens. And if it's not going to get to the hens, what is going to get to at that point? It's more of an attraction because these are truly outdoor and only outdoor animals. They are not indoor animals that you're suggesting. So with this, along with the precedent setting that my fellow trustees have highlighted, I've done some research, kind of looked at the homework. Although I'd want to say yes to this because I really don't like to impinge on people's property rights at all. But because we do live in a community setting, I wouldn't be able to vote for the variance at this time.
Trustee Sidor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to share with the board, I was curious, since I don't have the experience that Trustee Glasgow has with 30,000 chickens, but I do have a brother-in-law who has chickens like
And
Trustee-
cattle, too,
And
so.
cattle.
That's not
That's
on the
on
variance.
That's on next week's agenda.
Yes, the Brahmin bulls will be over on South Fernandez as well.
The llamas.
The first thing I did was call my brother-in-law out in Boulder, Colorado, who lives in a neighborhood setting, and they have a chicken coop with I think up to 5 or 6 chickens. And I asked him what are the pros and cons of this? What do the neighbors think? Very intelligent guy, and they like any pet, they keep it properly maintained. No complaints from the neighbors. Takes a certain pair of shoes that he wears, when he goes and takes care of the chickens, and then takes those shoes off and leaves them outside before he walks into his residence. They have a small adopted daughter, about 4 years old. So they're very aware of the health issues. He mentioned, make sure it's rodent-proof, and I would imagine there's more coyotes and other animals like that in Boulder, Colorado, than there are in Arlington Heights. But he says as long as they're, not just rodent-proof, but predator-proof cages, then, there's no issue with that in his situation. I also went over to Matt's house and visited with him and looked at his property, looked at the house next door, walked around, and as far as the location of the chicken coop would be concerned, and it's only being 7 feet tall, and was it 4x8?
4x8, correct.
I didn't see an issue with the size of it. There are other structures at surrounding homes that I would think would be more impairing the value of the surrounding properties. And so I don't think it also alters the character of the neighborhood, just my opinion, no research done on that. We sat and chatted about, I wanted to make sure that Matt was, very diligent and what kind of person he was. And I think he would be, a very responsible pet owner, like any other pet owner should be in the village. I also have a question for the health department. People have bird feeders, in their yards, and they can get a whole bunch of birds coming in and, have droppings. Would this be any different than that, except those droppings don't get cleaned up? I mean, when people have 2 or 3 bird feeders in their yard, we don't do anything with that. That's just their option, correct? Their desire.
Bird feeders are allowed, and the only difference would be with a bird feeder, you're going to have the bird seed spill onto the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You might have an attraction for, say, a hawk,
Mm-hmm.
whereas with a chicken coop, I would imagine it might attract, raccoons or foxes out of curiosity.
Talking about the possibilities of disease, I did some research on it with the Centers of Disease Control, and I didn't even know this. Pregnant women are susceptible to toxoplasmosis cleaning litter boxes in their homes. So I think for me, what this boils down to is how responsible of a pet owner you might be on the one case. The other case is that you did your due diligence and sent your talked to your neighbors, knocked on their doors, as you mentioned to me and you mentioned this evening, and outside of Mr. Garoppolo, we're in favor of it. And last but not least, speaking of Arlington Heights residents that go to Rolling Meadows High School, Matt's son was state champion pommel horse at Rolling Meadows High School 2 years ago.
Oh, thank you.
And now doing gymnastics for the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Right.
So just to tie that all in really nicely.
Right, thank you.
But that's those are my thoughts, Mayor Mulder. Thank you.
Trustee Blackwood?
Well, I think I'd like to hear what Trustee Breyer has to say first.
Well, I didn't know I was an oracle of wisdom over here, but.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'd like to hear your comment.
Oh, you're supposed to say. Jim?
Where trucks carry chickens, or?
As a matter of fact, we have on occasion, and they don't pay well, and they're lousy loads. But,
Lousy loads.
Jim, who are the natural? Who would? What animals would see this as a buffet? Who are the predators?
Coyotes.
I think interest-wise, it would probably be a raccoon or a fox or a coyote, something of that nature.
Possum?
Possibly, I don't know that a possum would have an interest.
Eggs.
They're fruit eaters.
They'd be looking for eggs.
Well,
Skunks.
now, raccoons, as a for instance, are able to chew into houses, if I recall correctly, with a little work. Given a little time, would they be able to get into this thing?
That I don't know.
I would be
It says it's
monitoring the
rodent.
coop, and if I saw any type of predator activity, I'd take steps right away to replace the wood they were gnawing at, or the wire they're not going to get through. It's 14-gauge wire. It's 1-inch square, and I don't see any way they would get through that.
If I may, most of the cases we've seen with raccoons involve the coon either figuring out how to open up the clasp, in which case I recommend that people install child-safe clasps on their coops. And then the other thing that raccoons will do is shoot a hand through the wire if the gauge is too large, and they'll grab a part of whatever chicken they can. The particular coop plans that Mr. Scallen has would put the birds away safely at night behind double-locked doors. There would be the main door to the coop, and then the door into the roost area would close up as well.
Correct.
And also, the gauge wire he's using would not permit a raccoon to put its paw through to grab a chicken leg or wing during the day.
Do you think, does the health, I just thought of a chicken load, I can't tell the story, it'll be on TV, but ask me in private, it was quite comical. But somebody actually stole the whole trailer of them. Would this serve, you think, as an undue attraction to these animals? Usually the staff makes a recommendation, and I see you've shied away from this.
I would think raccoons are in our yards all the time. Obviously, I would think a chicken coop would be an attraction to a raccoon.
I mean, we all probably know many people who've had the misfortune to have raccoons find their way into their attics, perhaps elsewhere. I would hate to see this draw these animals to the area, and I don't know how you can assure me that won't happen. This lot really is it's a little narrower than our standard lot, although it's a few feet longer. It's not an overly large lot. Does that pose any problems in the eyes of the health department?
I think the lot size in the backyard is of interest in the distance from the neighbors. What he's proposing is in the area of 50 to 60 feet from a neighboring property. I've seen in other communities that allow backyard chicken coops, they require a distance of approximately 30 feet. So I think from that avenue, they have reasonable distance requirements.
And our house is small, and it sits somewhat towards the front of the lot, so the backyard, when you walk back, it's spacious. So it's bigger, I think, than homes that are bigger on those same size lots, because the homes are bigger.
Just the attraction to the other animals is what disturbs me probably the most. And the fact that we don't have a positive recommendation from the staff. When I looked at this last night, it just didn't bother me that much one way or the other, but as I think about it and think about the attraction to other animals, I am concerned that this would be an attraction. Why do you want to do this anyway? This looks like a lot of work.
I'm fascinated with birds. I find them fascinating in that at some point in the evolutionary process, they lost their ability to fly, if they ever had it. I think they're attractive. I think they would make good pets in my experience with them. They fascinate me. We lost our dog, so we are looking for another pet, I think, and
The dog wags its tail and shows it likes you. What would a hen do?
you can hold them, you can pet them. They are receptive to affection.
I have no other questions.
Okay, now Trustee Blackwood.
Actually, I kind of like the idea. And the reason I do is because you are limiting the amount of hens to 3. This is not going to be an expansive coop. You seem like you're very well versed on, at least initially, versed on the art of hen keeping. And I think the idea that probably the eggs are wonderful. I grew up in the Northwest, and I raised ducks, and they didn't cluck, but they did quack. And I lived on Queen Anne Hill in the middle of Seattle, and my mother let me have these ducks because they ate the slugs in the yard, and so she didn't have to get the the pesticides to get rid of the slugs because the ducks would just walk around the yard and go ahead. Now, I understand that the free range aspect of it is just, in your, it's a supervised free range in your yard. And I understand there's concerns about, the idea of health issues, certainly of the chicken feces, but certainly you can compost that, and we're thinking about, we are composting now. I see Diane Bolash in the audience, and she's seemingly welcoming this. If this were a request, I almost liken it to having, and I don't mean to go to Trustee Glasgow's idea of just having one rabbit, but if you had a rabbit hutch and you had 3 rabbits, now they're quiet, but they have the same kind of initial attraction for predators. I have 3 or 4 bird feeders in my backyard, and I have skunks that like to eat the seeds. I have possums that come. I had a fox in my backyard, and walking down the front of the road was a coyote, and if my dogs were out, they probably would have been, subject to his interest as well. What I'm concerned about with this, and I think that you can probably allay my concerns, is if, as far as Trustee Farwell was concerned, he didn't like the idea of having noisy hens laying eggs. Is there a way that you could insulate the coop, not the coop, but the roosting house, so that maybe that could kind of quell the noise a bit?
Yes, and also I'd like to point out when the hen is laying its egg, it's inside a nesting box, and the nesting box is inside the roosting box, and then the roosting box is part of the run. So the clucking at the time of the egg laying would take place inside a plywood cube, which is also inside of the roosting box, which is 4 feet wide by 2 feet deep by roughly 40 inches high. So you have that, but I could take extra steps if that became
And
an issue,
insulate
too.
the outside a bit so that,
Sure.
and we're only talking 3 chickens. What kind of
Exactly.
chickens are you going to get?
Well, there's all different kinds.
And there are certain
Rhode
breeds
Island
that are
red
less
and-
vocal than others. So I would steer
Right.
him away from white leghorns because they like to sing a lot.
Right. But there's Rhode Island Reds, and there's,
Buff Orpingtons, Wyandottes,
Orpingtons
smattering,
yeah,
bunch of different varieties of breeds.
right. And at the different places where you can get chicks, they have the pictures of the chicks and what they look like when they're older and what their characteristics are and so forth. And so we would get something that would be winter hardy and wouldn't tend to be the flying type of bird, and one that would be appropriate for our backyard.
I have no further questions.
Not right now.
Not right now, okay. Do you have a follow-up?
There's been some mention of existing chicken coops in other neighboring communities. You've mentioned Oak Park, and I think Mr. McAllister mentioned some other communities that do allow chicken coops. Can you talk about that, Jim, in terms of what other communities do allow those?
A few communities that I'm familiar with would be Lombard, Naperville, Evanston, Batavia, Cary. That's a few communities that are allowing.
And what's your experience, Ms. Murtaugh?
In terms of what communities have chickens?
Right, allow chicken coops.
Yeah, what he's named there, and then also Chicago allows chickens. Chickens are legal in Chicago. There's a couple other communities that just passed ordinances allowing chickens as well.
Well, to me, I think it's a policy question. The request here is a variance, but this is, to me, it's different than an extra 6 inches on a fence, for example. I think this really is a policy question, whether or not we should allow chicken coops in the village of Arlington Heights, and to me, the answer is no.
Okay.
I just have one follow-up.
One follow-up.
When I sat
Trustee
on the
Glasgow.
zoning, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I apologize. When I sat on the zoning board of appeals, one of the things that I always took into consideration was when people asked for variance, when people came and spoke, and people talked to me who were affected directly by the variance. If I didn't get anybody that complained, and the people around ended up complaining, then, I was more receptive to it, and I would look at it more as a policy issue, like Trustee Hayes was just saying, which is another question entirely. But let's presume that the board grants your variance. You've already got one person who doesn't really want this, and by doing this, you're enjoining him from enjoying his property and his property rights. Because he does have to live next to you, and as Trustee Farwell pointed out, we live in an area where you have 5-foot lot lines in some areas. And you've got 10 feet between houses. You don't have rolling hills. You don't have 450 acres between the next parcel of land. If he were to come to you and say, hey, I don't like these, what are you going to do? Are you just going to thumb your nose at him and say, well, they granted the variance, I'm going to keep my chickens over here?
Well, as in the statement, I would invite him to get more education on what it's like to have chickens, and through Jennifer's workshops that she provides, where he could listen to other people's experience that have chickens, and other neighbors of those that are next to those that have chickens.
But presume for a second they sing. Presume for a second, you've got these issues going on, and now I, as a neighbor of yours, am sitting next to there, and I can't even sit on my back porch. I have a neighbor who likes to play a musical instrument. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't.
Right.
I can ask him to stop, and I can ask him not to do that. I can't do that with an animal that's sitting out there day in and day out, and it's an outdoor animal. And that's my real concern, aside from the policy issue, which I think is a very important one that Trustee Hayes raised. But if you're it is a wonderful idea, but I don't have to live next to you, and I don't have to listen to that. And if it bothers me going out on my back porch, and that's all I hear, as when I've traveled in the past and I shared with Trustee Blackwood in one of the places I was at, all I heard was chicken. A day in and day out. Every day that I was there was a chicken in my backyard. And that's something that I have to take into consideration.
Right. Now, I do have something of an experience similar to that. It's not a chicken, but it's a noise issue with my neighbor too. That I haven't mentioned it to him because I feel there's a certain amount of give and take, and I want to be a good neighbor. So I haven't mentioned to him that on Sunday afternoon when he's in his backyard, he's got the radio playing all afternoon, Saturday and Sunday. I haven't said anything to him about that. I haven't said anything either to him that during the week at 2 a.m, there's a party going on in his yard, and there's people there that are talking at the top of their lungs at 3 a.m, and I've got to go to work the next day.
And those are all things that all of us deal with, living in the area where we chose to live.
Right. My point is that there's a certain amount of give and take, and I'm giving him a lot of give in the noise level that I'm getting from his property.
Mhm.
So if there's some now coming from my property that's a little bit, I'm hoping that there can be some give and take, because I'm giving a lot in the last 16 years living to them noise level. I've put up with a lot.
I understand. I do.
Okay.
However, I'm concerned not just about one person, but every other person that adjoins the property, as well as the other concerns that I have.
Right.
And it's all fine and dandy, but I don't have to live next to you at the end of the day. And, I don't think anybody sitting here on the board has to live next door to that
Right.
at the end of the day. And as Trustee Farwell said, listening to those things, we may not want to live next to them. And I have to respect that because of where we live and what the design of this particular village is.
Right.
So,
If-
again, I'm not going to begrudge you for wanting fresh eggs. I really, truly
Sure.
do appreciate that, but it might be easier to go down to Jewel and get them as opposed to having.
Right. I would like the opportunity to see if there was a noise issue with them, and if it was, and it became a point where he couldn't take it anymore, or even before that, where it was just such a complete nuisance, I'd say, Tony, I'm going to get rid of the chickens. I don't want an unhappy neighbor. I don't want to have chickens and an unhappy neighbor. I would rather have no chickens and a happy neighbor. So if it got to that, I would do that.
Thank you very much, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yeah, we do have a request from a resident in the area that would like to address the board. So don't go far away, but
Okay.
I'm going to ask if Sheila Meyer would please come forward, give your name and address, please, into the microphone.
My name is Sheila Meyer. I live at 106 Norwood Court in Rolling Meadows. I'm here on behalf of my mother, who lives 2 doors down from them, and she's elderly. She couldn't be out here this late. But I do have letters from some of the neighbors and 35 signatures from neighbors and residents that have the same concerns of most of the trustees with the odor, the smell, the disease, the rodents possibly coming. The school's nearby, Wayside's there, and South School is there as well. So all the 35 people are saying, not in my community. They just don't want, not all of them live right near him, but if you allow it in that neighborhood, what's to prevent it from going to other neighborhoods, or other, blocks and areas. So I didn't bring this by sooner. I didn't have a chance, so that's why I'm bringing it tonight and presenting it.
If you could bring it forward, and then we'll get it to the clerk.
Thank you.
I'll accept those. Thank you very much. Your mother has a very nice first name.
Yes, she does.
Must be Arlene. What's her address?
Petitioners can come back up forward, please. Great. I don't want to be different from my colleagues, but I top them all with my experience with chickens.
Okay.
I was in charge of the chicken coop on our farm. And so not only did I get to feed them, we had a very tall fence. And I don't know, they have wings and they can jump. But I don't recall how many, but I think somewhere between 20 and 30. And I was also in charge of picking up the eggs. Chickens were kind of friendly, but not, I never considered them a pet. And living on a farm, you have lots of animals. But I think this is a country where you like to be able to do what you want to do, but you have to pick the right environment. And my concern is a little bit of a precedent, and it's been referred to by many of the trustees. I'd be hard-pressed if we agreed to this petition to deny another for some unusual reason. It would be hard to justify. I think consistency in government is extremely important. And I kept trying to look, and I went by your home this afternoon. And I couldn't see everything, but I kind of tried to figure out where it was going to be. It was going to be to the north side of the back of your house. And you do have a very deep yard. And it looks like you're really into plant material. I don't know, you have some structure
Vines, grapevines.
Is it grapevines, and then there's something else that had stairs going up
It's
to?
a deck in the back, correct,
There's
to
a
look down on the vines, and it's behind the
totally
bushes.
independent deck, it's not
Correct,
attached
it's
to the house.
freestanding. Freestanding, correct.
So I thought, okay, this is a person who likes nature, and that's good. I mean, I like it too. But the precedent, I'm real hard pressed, and I think that's why in our ordinance, this requires such a petition to come. And if you were in one of our half-acre lots or acre lot areas where we have a much more rural sense, in fact, some of these neighborhoods that I'm thinking about don't have sidewalks, narrower streets, that wouldn't be, and I know the distances are there, but it still would be very difficult, again, that it's more of a true suburban environment that you live in. I mean, you're near a school, near neighbors. If it were someplace that had much more space for auditory recognition of the clucking sound or whatever, it's a difficult situation, and I love animals, and unlike Trustee Scaletta, yeah, I do eat them too. But chickens are unique, and they have personalities, and who's one person to tell another person that they can or cannot? But this is more of an environment that you have immediate neighbors. And I was going to look at the petitions here. If there's 35 people, I don't know if they have addresses, are in the vicinity that have issue. I think that has a strong message that they're not maybe comfortable with this. I know it's taken a while for us to get into composting and some other things that are becoming very popular, and chickens may also, but I don't know. I really have mixed feelings because I come from a farm, and everybody has chickens. So it's a challenge. You're asking for something extraordinarily different than anyone's done here before, and that's part of the challenge.
Sure.
And if you have any additional comments, Trustee Farwell?
I was just thinking, since there's a formal request, I think we should probably make some sort of motion on the variance. So I think at this point, having heard the board and having heard basically the sentiments of 35 others, I'll make a motion, reluctantly, unfortunately, for the denial of a variance request for 405 South Walnut Avenue from Section 16-103 of Arlington Heights Municipal Code.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Farwell, seconded by Trustee Hayes. Should I read the letter that was presented into the record? It'll just be attached.
Might want to read, yeah.
Oh, I should read it? I can read fast. I'm writing the letter to you concerning our neighbor's desire to build a chicken coop and raising 3 chickens. I have talked to people and have read up on chicken coops in urban areas, and like the majority of people, I also feel like it's a cute idea, as long as it's not next door to me. We are outdoor people. We have a dog, cat, and tropical fish. We are gardeners and sit in our yard. And after looking into it quite a bit, we strongly are against the whole idea. The main reason is the manure. I think that's what it is. It's they basically eat and poop day and night. During a heavy rain, our neighbor's yard sub-pump drain into our yard, which floods. It's very well could bring this poop and other parasites, spreading it around. Chickens can also carry lice and fleas. Chickens also are noisy, and the coop will be located in the center of our yard, 10 feet from our fence, which is now 14. I have talked to Matt and Terry and have expressed how we feel. I'm not one to tell you what to do, but as we see it and may have talked to see it, this would be a nuisance to us. We feel it's a cute idea if it were out in the country where you would not bother any neighbors. And like so many people, have said to us, I wouldn't have a problem with it as long as it wasn't next door to me. Thank you for hearing our side of the issue. And then there's
There's a name on there. Isn't there?
yes, it's Tony Garoppolo and Garoppolo and
Right.
Denise Garoppolo, 323 South Walnut. And then the adjacent document with signatures and addresses. Any other final comments from staff? Trustees, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Farwell?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
No.
Trustee Glasgow?
Yes.
Trustee Hayes?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Breyer?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
No.
President Mulder?
Yes. Motion carries. That means it's a denial.
That's okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your research.
Sure, you're welcome.
And
On to something else.
thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you very
I'm
much for your
sorry.
time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Find my place on the agenda here. Petitions and communications, report of the village manager. We've done that. Anything else, Mr. Dixon?
No, thanks.
Motion for adjournment would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Motion by trustee Hayes, seconded by trustee Scaletta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone in the audience. All wanted to learn more about chickens, so thank you very much.